Hi, my name is Dana, and I am a mom to a type 1 diabetic toddler named Francesco, and I am fighting for a safe education for my type 1 diabetic. Since Chesco was diagnosed at 3 years old in August of 2023, I have really made it my mission as a mom to advocate for the type 1 diabetic community. Our world was completely rocked when we were diagnosed, and there was so much we did not know. So my mission was to spread awareness in the hopes that the next person that was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes or that lacked information like I did would be more informed. But most recently, we've really been struggling with preschool becoming an unsafe environment for Chesco solely due to his type 1 diabetes. So Chesco has been in preschool since September, and he does require a nurse to manage his diabetes. But we have found, unfortunately, in our situation and lived experience, that there are no requirements for Chesco's assigned nurse to have any type of formal hands-on type 1 diabetic training or experience. This situation has become completely unsafe and dangerous, and after multiple dangerous situations that Chesco was put in, we had to make the difficult decision to pull him from preschool for the time being until adequately trained nurses with type 1 hands-on training could be provided and assigned to Chesco. Chesco loves school and is thriving academically and socially, but the lack of properly trained nurses just made it unsafe for him to attend. And unfortunately, this is not new to us. Our journey with advocating for a safe learning environment started back in September of 2023. So for over a year and a half, we have been advocating for a properly trained type 1 diabetic nurse with experience to be assigned. But unfortunately, instead of support, we've been dismissed, ignored, threatened, intimidated, faced pushback, which has been completely disappointing. This year alone, already from September to now, we've already gone through 4 different nurses, none of which have had type 1 hands-on training or experience. And myself, as Chesco's parent, provided hands-on training to each of those nurses, which included 1 to 2 hours of training, going over all of Chesco's devices, his specific needs, his diabetes medical management plan, and this still proved to not be enough because they lacked their own proper training and experience, that I was still getting continuous calls and texts from these nurses asking what to do. This completely disrupted my work schedule. It caused financial strain on us because I had to alter my work schedule. And if properly trained type 1 diabetic nurses with experience, with hands-on training were provided to Chesco, this situation could be completely preventable, and Chesco could be in school. For anyone that doesn't know, type 1 diabetes is extremely complicated and intricate, and no two situations are ever the same, no matter what you do. So I'm not blind to that. I understand that there is room for error with nurses. However, I have been told that I am the problem and that I am not letting the nurses learn, and that is just completely false. I am a mom of a 4-year-old type 1 diabetic who just wants to send her son to school safely and not be scared that something might happen because there is not properly trained individuals. I am a mom advocating that this is not an environment for nurses to learn. He is 4. They are in charge of a lethal drug that could kill him, and I don't think my requests are unwarranted. I want my son to go to school safely. That is my only goal, and the lack of proper training is my main concern. There is no hands-on training and no type 1 diabetic experience required for my son's nurses, and this has to change. This is proving to be an extremely dangerous situation for, of all places, school. My son has a right to schooling and education, and his type 1 diabetes is completely not allowing that to happen due to lack of proper protocols and guidelines in place for type 1 diabetes in preschool. So Chesco has his nursing services provided through Delaware County Intermediate Unit, and when these situations became clear that it was unsafe and dangerous for me to send my son to school in these conditions, I requested that the training be altered, that these nurses be held accountable for hands-on training, and that I should say DCIU be accountable for providing that training. And I was ignored, I was dismissed, I was the one who was told to come up with the training. I really think that should be the institution that is providing the services, not the parents, right? That being said, back in the fall, CHOP, who is Chesco's diabetes endocrinology team, offered a school training expo that was specifically designed for schools, school staff, nurses. It was an 8-hour hands-on day that I provided to Chesco's team, his school, and said this would be a great opportunity to provide this said hands-on training that I am requesting. And instead I was ignored. I was also threatened by the director of his school. I received a phone call that said if I kept pushing for more training, I was going to lose his nurse, and that was a good nurse, and she knows good nurses when she sees them, despite her lack of experience or any knowledge of type 1 diabetes. So I have been threatened, ignored, and intimidated for standing up for a safe education for my son because of his type 1 diabetes. So instead of working with me to provide a safe outcome for Chesco to go to school, DCIU denied my request to serve as Chesco's medical caregiver. I only requested this after my multiple requests of hands-on training be provided to these nurses and a part of DCIU's protocols and procedures for training for these nurses. So after this was denied several times, I requested to be his medical caregiver. At one point, I was told that I could. I had to provide my clearances. I provided all of my clearances, and then that quickly changed, and I was denied access as his medical caregiver, which is directly impeding his right to school, and the reasoning was that it was a conflict of interest. My only interest is Chesco attending school safely, and DCIU failed to provide a safe learning environment for my son because they could not properly, adequately manage type 1 diabetes despite them promising that they could. Throughout this process, DCIU has stood by their training, stating it's completely sufficient. They have a nurse ready, willing, and able to go to school, and I am the one preventing my son from being in school. However, their training consists of YouTube videos, reading material from Wisconsin that completely contradicts Chesco's diabetes medical management plan with guidelines on how to care for certain situations. And again, I live in Pennsylvania, not Wisconsin, so Wisconsin guidelines for type 1 diabetes, I have no idea why is in their training for type 1 diabetes. So DCIU remains firm that their training is sufficient. And this brings up another crucial point, that a specialist is needed when coming up with guidelines for such a specialty area such as type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes needs to be recognized as a specialty, and it needs to require a specialist such as an endocrinologist or someone who has certifications in type 1 diabetes be a part of the training procedures and protocols process. Just because you have a nursing license or medical knowledge or medical background, it does not make it okay and safe for that person to say what is sufficient training. Only a specialist can say what is sufficient training, and a specialist needs to be a part of DCIU or the said agency's guidelines for type 1 diabetic training. As I said, DCIU remained firm that their training was sufficient, and throughout this process, while advocating for my son's safety, I was threatened by DCIU that if I did not abide by their nurse that they said is sufficiently trained, that I could be prevented from ever entering his preschool again. I have never been confrontational. I have never posed any immediate threat to the school. All I have ever done is state that this is not safe and these are my reasons. There is no type 1 hands-on training provided, and there is no type 1 experience required for the nurses taking care of my son. I am a mother that wants my son to go to school safely and not worry that he might not come home because he was put in a dangerous situation with a lethal drug because the nurses that were staffed for him didn't have the proper training. I know I'm not the only mom, parent, or caregiver going through these challenges with preschool and type 1 diabetes, and I demand change. This is a common occurrence for parents to have to text teachers, school staff, and tell them how to manage their kids' diabetes because there is no set procedures in place. I've been told as a parent that preschool is an option. I don't have to send my kid to preschool. Well, that's not okay anymore. Type 1 diabetes is rising. The amount of kids being diagnosed is getting younger also in preschool. While in my situation, it seems that the schools that we have attended, it is not common. This needs to change. There needs to be guidelines and procedures in place for parents that do choose to send their kids to preschool. There needs to be guidelines in place so that they can attend school safely. My situation is preschool and type 1 diabetes is not safe because of a lack of proper training and protocols in place, and I demand that there be proper specialty protocols and guidelines in place for preschool. This needs to happen to ensure safety among preschoolers and prevent medical emergencies and fatalities. All I want is for my son to attend school safely without fear that something is going to happen because of lack of trained individuals caring for my son. I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, and I'm an advocate, and I am demanding change so that my son can go to preschool safely with type 1 diabetes.